One of the important stories of our time is the return of Jews to the nation of Israel. And joining me now is Alan Hoffman. He's Director General of the Jewish Agency, the largest Jewish nonprofit organization in the world, and one which is helping Jews come to Israel. So, right. Alan, thank you for being with us. So where are most of the Jews coming from that are coming to Israel?
It's a pleasure to be here, first of all. And, the Jewish Agency has brought 4 million Jews to Israel since the state was created. And in every period, there are different groups of Jews who need to be brought to Israel or who wish to be brought to Israel. So whereas in the early years of the state, we brought 120,000 Jews from Iraq and several 100,000 Jews from Morocco and many of the countries of North Africa. In the last 25 years, the Jewish Agency brought 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union. And even today, close to 16,000 Jews come from Russia and from the Ukraine. More and more what we're seeing is young professionals who believe that there's no future under Mr. Putin, or who come from the eastern parts of the Ukraine where there's still fighting and conflict, also related to Russia. And so we have an ongoing stream of close to 15,000 Jews who come from Russia and from the Ukraine and from the former Soviet Union altogether. More recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a very strong stream of Jews coming from Europe, particularly from France, after a wave of anti-Semitic incidents, terrible terrorist attack in Toulouse at a Jewish school. The following year, 2015 and 2016, we saw close to 8,000 French Jews coming to Israel. That's 8,000 Jews out of a total population of 500,000. In 1 year, that's a very big percentage.
And there have been more attacks just recently in France. In Paris, just a little over a week ago, we saw an elderly woman who survived the Holocaust. I think she was 85 years old. She was brutally murdered.
Brutally murdered.
Yeah.
So I should say that after the Bataclan attack, which is almost 2 years ago on the nightclub in Paris, the French government responded by bringing army into Jewish institutions. And I think for about a year there was a sense of security, and the immigration went down a bit from 8,000 a year to about 6,000 a year. But one of the things that we're noticing, particularly in the last couple of weeks, and this is true about Europe in general, there's concern in Hungary, there's concern in France, there is concern of a new and very ugly wave of anti-Semitism sweeping Western Europe, and I think that we will see more Jews coming to Israel.
Well, what kind of stories are you hearing from those who do come to Israel from Europe?
I think that not everybody realizes that when Jews left North Africa, Algeria is a good example, or Tunisia, at the same time, there were many Muslims who were leaving at the same time. And these Jews and Muslims moved to France and moved into these new neighborhoods that the French government were building, and lived very peacefully, cheek by jowl, for a long time. But as many of the Muslim populations have become radicalized, it has become much, much more difficult for Jews to actually live in France in this situation where their neighbor may be somebody who is becoming increasingly anti-Semitic and increasingly radicalized. I think you may know that in France, the rabbis of France actually made a rabbinic decision that French Jews do not have to wear the head covering in order not to be identified in the public transportation. That is quite something for a country that gave the world the French Revolution and the values of the French Revolution, and Jews today feel uncomfortable wearing a religious head covering in public areas in France.
Well, that's limiting their free speech, is it not?
It's
And
limiting
their
their
freedom
free
of religion.
speech. It's limiting their free speech. I think that we hear of Jewish children being taunted in public schools. There's a big push of families who would like to get places that don't exist in Jewish schools. And so families say, if this is what the future is going to look like, I don't think that this is what I'd like to see for my children. And we see many, many young people making a decision to leave. A large number of them decide to come to live in Israel.
So a lot of them from France, any other places in Europe where this is a big problem?
Well, I mentioned the Ukraine, important, and Russia, important to mention.
That harbors back to the pogroms.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think Hungary, that sadly after the Holocaust, where such a huge number of Hungarian Jews were killed in Auschwitz, there were 100,000 Jews who were left in Budapest. But the most recent elections in countries like Hungary, one sees governments that, quite frankly, give us some concern.
Well, the other concern, I'm sure, is Poland right now, because Poland actually passed a law where you cannot talk about collusion between Poles and Nazis against Jews from the Second World War.
So our biggest concern about Poland, I should say about Poland, there are sadly very, very few Jews left in Poland after the Second World War. Warsaw, that was a city where half its entire population before 1939 were Jewish. Warsaw today is a city with a very, very small number of Jews. But what the biggest concern regarding Poland is the fact that, unlike Germany, that has dealt very well with restitution of Jewish property and compensation for Jews who lost property and for Jews who were sent to the gas chambers, Poland has not taken responsibility. And one of the concerns that we have in Israel is for those Polish Holocaust survivors who are still alive and whose children live in Israel and have not been able to get the kind of restitution and compensation that they're entitled to.
How can you even consider trying to get restitution when the society now does not even allow you to talk freely about those who worked with the Nazis and against the Jews?
Right, right. Absolutely.
So what do you do for them then, those that are coming from France, more coming from France now, also other places in Europe? What do you do for them when they come to Israel?
So I think one of the things that is a truism, and I think any of your viewers who was an immigrant will know, is that it's not just making the decision to migrate, it's the initial absorption that makes all the difference. And so the Jewish Agency for Israel has not only brought 4 million Jews to Israel, but we run a network of absorption centers through Israel. 17, we do this in cooperation with the government of Israel, where we offer immigrants a corridor in which they learn Hebrew, they're given coping skills. In some cases, let's say Ethiopian immigrants who have come from a third world country, we help them to acquire a trade or a profession. I'm not sure whether you know, I'm sure you remember, that the very first law on the books of the State of Israel was the law of return. Any Jew who says they want to come into the State of Israel has the absolute right to become a citizen. There's no country that has a law like that on the books, but it gives us, the state and the Jewish people, a great responsibility in terms of how to integrate those people.
Well, Alan Hoffman, we appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us a little more about this rising anti-Semitism in Europe and what you're trying to do for those who are coming to Israel.
So it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I should say this is the week before the 70th birthday of the State of Israel, the 70th birthday of Israel's independence. And I think that one of the biggest assets for the State of Israel is the support of Christians around the world who believe in Israel and believe in the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy.